Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, right? And you find out that every single country on Earth just stopped using the US dollar, literally overnight. Oil markets would instantly freeze, stock markets would go into full blown panic mode, governments would be scrambling into emergency meetings, international trade would basically grind to a halt, and banks would be bracing for absolute chaos. Sounds totally impossible, doesn't it? Maybe. But here's the real question we need to ask ourselves. Why would the entire world panic over one single country's currency? I mean, America is just one nation out of nearly 200, so why on earth does its money dictate everyone else's reality? Well, the answer actually lies in a pretty strange anomaly that's unfolding in the global markets right now. We are looking at a genuinely fascinating situation here in 2026. The International Monetary Fund just downgraded global growth projections. Geopolitical conflicts are flaring up everywhere, completely messing with.
History is absolutely littered with fallen empires. Power changes hands, leaders come and go, and technology completely rewrites the rules. Yet somehow, despite all that historical gravity pulling everything else down, the US dollar stubbornly stays right at the undisputed center of global finance.
It's kind of the core mystery of the modern economy, right? How has this one single currency survived decades of wild technological disruption, devastating wars, and massive geopolitical shifts? I mean, if it gained all its muscle in a totally different era, why does it still have this absolute iron grip on the world today?
Well, the answer is actually hidden in a system that most people, frankly, never even think about. A system that quietly touches almost everything we buy. In this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers of this onion. Because dollar dominance, it's not just a product of political power or, international affection. It's this quiet, hidden financial matrix that literally dictates the price of your groceries, the gas in your car, and the overall stability of your investments. Let's start with layer 1, the oil connection. Imagine for a second you're running an entire country. Your factories and your transportation systems desperately need oil just to survive. But here's the catch. Almost all of the world's oil is priced in someone else's currency, the US dollar. This is what we call the petrodollar effect. So country A sells oil to country B, but the transaction, it has to happen in dollars. Before any nation can secure the energy it desperately needs just to keep the lights on, it literally has to go out and secure dollars first. So even countries with absolutely zero economic or political ties to America suddenly find themselves needing dollars simply because they need energy.
And that creates this constant, inescapable global demand. This cycle repeats millions of times every single day. Banks process dollars, markets track dollars, governments hoard dollars just to make sure they can meet their energy needs tomorrow. A lot of people just assume the dollar's dominance comes from politics alone. But honestly, it's heavily reinforced by the raw, basic necessity of global trade.
Which brings us to layer 2, the banking highway. Think of international trade as this giant, incredibly complex physical highway. Ships are moving products, banks are processing payments, and almost all of that infrastructure is paved using dollar-based systems. When foreign companies trade with each other, dollars just become the common language. And again, it's not because they all deeply love America. It's the default setting on the global machine. And that leads right into layer 3, the safe place during fear. To really grasp this, we can look at the IMF's 2026 Economic Report on Foreign Exchange. It highlights this really profound paradox in human psychology regarding the safe haven asset. The US dollar index, or DXY, is kind of the ultimate example here. Whenever the world faces a massive geopolitical shock, a war, or just a slowing global economy, investors do something that seems highly counterintuitive.
Just look at this summary from Investing.com in Q1 of 2026. As tensions escalated and global risk appetite weakened, investors actually actively unwound their positions in other assets, like emerging market equities, and rushed all their money straight into dollar-denominated assets. In moments of pure panic, people move their money into the very system they already know, because uncertainty makes familiarity incredibly valuable, which means the dollar actually strengthens during, and honestly, often especially during global crises.
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. America issues the currency the world already wants. And that creates an enormous, totally hidden financial advantage. While other nations are out there scrambling for foreign currencies just to keep their global trade afloat, America has the extraordinary flexibility to run massive deficits, dictate global sanctions, and operate completely differently without crashing its own economy.
Every single empire, from the Romans to the British, looks permanently unstoppable right up until the exact moment it falls. History is absolutely crystal clear on this point.
You know, every empire really does look permanent while it's sitting there at its peak. History is literally full of these incredibly powerful financial and political systems that seemed completely impossible to replace. The people living inside them couldn't even imagine a viable alternative. Until, well, they were replaced.
Which leads us to a pretty fascinating modern dilemma, and really this central question of this explainer. Could the exact same thing happen to the US dollar? Like, are we staring down a sudden, catastrophic collapse? Or is the financial dominance of the dollar somehow structurally different from those empires of the past? See, the big myth here is that a currency collapse happens overnight. But the reality, it's not a sudden crash. It's a much slower, gradual erosion of trust. Financial systems almost never disappear in a single dramatic moment. Instead, trust just kind of slowly shifts. New competitors pop up, habits change, tech evolves, and trade patterns move around. This whole process can take years, or honestly decades. So the real threat to the dollar isn't some sudden overnight crash, it's this slow, gradual erosion.
Section 2. The Challenger Problem.
Now here's the tough part. Everyone talks about replacing the dollar with a new currency, which, let's be real, is super easy to talk about. But there's a massive distinction here. What the world actually needs isn't just a new currency. It needs a new system. Think about it. Imagine a challenger emerges tomorrow. Can that network actually handle trillions of dollars in global trade every single day? Can it command massive institutional trust? Can governments and banks absolutely depend on it during a severe global economic crisis? Building a truly global financial system is, without a doubt, one of the hardest projects in human history.
Section 1. The Safe Haven Illusion. Why the World Panics into Dollars. Recent density data from the IMF shows us exactly how this traditional safe haven channel actually plays out. When global growth starts to stumble and inflation forces interest rates to stay higher for longer, well, capital historically floods right back into US-denominated assets. It's like a giant financial magnet. Investors will actually actively unwind their positions in emerging market equities and, yes, even gold. You know, the assets that were supposed to protect them against a weak dollar in the first place? They drop them because the magnetic pull of the dollar's safety is just way too strong to ignore. And this safe haven panic, it directly bleeds into the physical world of trade. Even with this massive reorientation of global trade we're seeing, where supply chains are shifting and imports and exports are visibly moving away from legacy structures, the dollar just remains so firmly entrenched. Section 2. The Digital Trojan Horse, the Stealthy Global Takeover. So while traditional finance relies heavily on correspondence banks, where, to be fair, its absolute global dominance is slowly receding as countries diversify their reserves, digital finance operates on a completely different level. Over in the digital realm of programmable ledgers and blockchains, dollar dominance is absolutely surging. The dollar is essentially finding a brand new programmable life, one that doesn't even require a traditional US bank. It's quietly invading frontier markets through a completely new, stealthy avenue. Just let this staggering statistic sink in for a second. 95%, over 95% of all global stablecoin value is entirely dollar-denominated. No way, right? But it's true. While the whole world has been totally hyper-focused on trade wars, tariffs, and central bank interest rates, the US currency has seamlessly morphed into a new digital form. It's extending its reach into markets that were previously totally off-limits to the US banking system. This whole stablecoin expansion runs on a massive network effect. Think of it kind of like a global messaging app. The more people who use it, the more essential it becomes for everyone else. Major issuers are out there driving proactive regulatory engagement, making sure there's native support across 29 different blockchain networks. This creates incredible interoperability and makes it the go-to asset for corporate on-chain treasuries. But you want to know the truly revolutionary part? These stablecoins are acting as de facto digital dollar accounts for the unbanked. For folks living in countries with severe currency volatility, this tech lets them hold on to dollar value and completely bypass their local, often unstable banking systems. It acts as a massive digital amplifier for dollar power. Section 3. Infrastructure as the Reserve. Owning the digital rails. Which brings us to a literally monumental shift. According to a 2026 PwC report on the dollar's digital future, we are actively moving away from a world where reserve power was anchored purely in who held U.S. Treasury bonds. Instead, we're entering a reality where power depends on who actually operates the digital networks. Global payment rails, digital custodians, and stablecoin issuers are effectively stepping up as quasi-reserve intermediaries. They're the ones holding U.S. assets and distributing them globally through APIs and ledgers. Power is quietly but surely transferring right off of central bank balance sheets and directly into the hands of digital infrastructure providers. Caroline McElroy over at PwC US hit the nail on the head with this. She noted, as the financial system becomes more digital, the dollar's future will hinge less on who issues it and more on the infrastructure it can operate across. And wow, that perfectly captures the reality of 21st century finance, doesn't it? It is no longer just about who owns the printing press, it's all about network interoperability. Owning the digital pipes and establishing absolute network dominance. That is exactly what preserves the dollar's empire today.
Section 4, the systemic lesson.
Take a really close look at this map from PwC, which maps out the dollar's digital reach across emerging markets. Here's the thing most people miss. The world's most powerful financial structures are built slowly through trust, adoption, and consistency. The dollar system isn't collapsing, it's actually upgrading. It's expanding its reach into emerging markets, not through old-school correspondent banking, but through digital stablecoins. For populations dealing with severe currency volatility, these stablecoin wallets are basically acting as de facto digital dollar accounts, pushing the network way beyond America's physical borders.
95%. That is a truly staggering number. Over 95% of all global stablecoin value is dollar-denominated. This is actively transforming the dollar from a traditional reserve asset that just sits quietly in central banks into a highly programmable digital reserve network operating 24/7. So the dollar's dominance is actively being reinforced through tech rather than just pure policy.
So, what's the core takeaway for us as investors? Well, smart money totally ignores those sensational headlines about sudden overnight collapses. Instead, you've got to focus on incentives, track institutional trust, follow real-world network adoption. You have to understand that replacing a deeply embedded system relied upon by literally billions of people, a system that is actively digitizing itself as we speak, is a monumentally difficult task.
Section 5. The final insight.
At the end of the day, the dollar's greatest strength isn't the paper it's printed on, the printing presses, or even the politics behind it. It's collective belief. Caroline McElroy from PwC hit the nail on the head here, saying, as the financial system becomes more digital, the dollar's future will hinge less on who issues it and more on the infrastructure it can operate across. In the world of finance, belief very often becomes reality. And until the world stops trusting this vast, newly digitized infrastructure, the dollar remains pretty much untouchable.
Which leaves us with this final kind of lingering question to chew on. Who will actually govern the future of digital money? And honestly, will national monetary sovereignty even survive the blockchain? The US dollar didn't become this ridiculously powerful by accident, and its new digital dominance certainly isn't maintained by luck. Behind the scenes, there is this incredibly complex system of trade, digital infrastructure, and global trust keeping it all afloat. But think about it. If the digital pipes of the future are completely ruled by the dollar, can any other nation ever truly control its own economy? Understanding this hidden system completely changes how you see the modern world.